This was before I even came to studying.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi at-tahirin wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin amma ba'd. Is it on? Is it off? Do you want to switch on? Let me put this on so we can see the screen.
I don't know button on that side. Behind it.
I don't know, TV guy. IT guy, come and sort this out.
You might want to go around that side.
Okay. Just to start while it gets started, inshallah. So last week, we ended up talking about isn't there like a button here?
Check in the middle where the red light is. Did you just turn off like that? Yeah.
Ah, mashallah. Mashallah. So last week, we weren't here the week before, we spoke about i'tibar, tawabi and shawahid, and you would use this i'tibar and using follow-up chains of narration when it comes to hadith which are narrated by individuals who are not what we call muttaham bil kidhb. So they weren't accused of lying. So then how did they become weak? And I said last time I would give a few examples of how these people became weak. And then today is Jarh and Tadeel, just a summary of the science of Jarh and Tadeel, which we covered last week, but inshallah we'll cover briefly again. So just to end from last time about which narrations would you use that are complementary to a narration which is weak? How would that chain be weak if the person is not muttaham bil kidhb? For example, this person is not accused of lying, then how else do they become weak? Right? And we mentioned it right in the beginning why people become weak, but now we can inshallah give some examples. So the first example of why, okay, you guys give me examples of why people are weak in narrating hadith. They make mistakes from memory, and this could be for several reasons. One is that they lose their books, and they're just relying on their memory to sort of narrate these hadith. So, for example, Hushaym ibn Bashir, he wrote letters, and he wrote books of hadith. And he wrote the transmissions which he got from his sheikh. And what happened was there was a huge storm at that time, and in Mecca, and his books got ruined. And then after that point, he kept on narrating hadith, but he started making mistakes. So whoever heard from him before the big storm, then you would accept their narrations because he was trustworthy. But the thing is, he lost his books after the storm. And hence he would transmit from his memory and he would make mistakes. And then you have Ali ibn Mishar al-Kufi, and his books were actually buried. And then after that, his eyesight actually deteriorated. And this is what Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Imam Bukhari actually said, كان قد دفن كتبه فكان لا يجيء بحديثه كما ينبغي. He wouldn't narrate the hadith as he used to. And then there's an issue as well, narrating hadith with the meaning. Okay, and I think it was touched upon early about narrating hadith with the meaning, not with the exact words. So I've got a hadith and I'm narrating it based on the meaning of the hadith. So this was practiced by Imam Bukhari, and someone mentioned again it was the mu'allaqat of Bukhari. Here, okay, maybe. Sure, is it? Okay, so this is the mu'allaqat. So the mu'allaq hadith is that which has one or more narrators consecutively deleted from the beginning to of the isnad. So for when al-Bukhari rahimahullah says so and so, it's narrated from so and so that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, or he says the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and he didn't narrate a sanad. He didn't use a chain of narration, which has been done in the Sahih al-Bukhari. So, for example, he didn't narrate the chain of narration, he just narrated. And we mentioned several reasons why he would do this. Some of the scholars actually said when he does this in particular times, so in a mu'allaq, when he uses sighatul jazm, so when he uses the active voice. So he says, Abu Musa said the Prophet ﷺ covered his thighs when Usman entered. Al-Bukhari just said Abu Musa al-Ashari. Bukhari rahimahullah, he didn't live at the time of Abu Musa al-Ashari. Abu Musa al-Ashari died well before Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala was born. But he's still saying Abu Musa said, without a chain of narration. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari. This is what we call mu'allaqat of Bukhari, with the active voice, saying the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Abu Musa said. Then you have mu'allaqat of the passive voice, where Imam Bukhari says, and it has been narrated from Ibn Abbas. Yeah, and then again, Jarhad and Muhammad ibn Jahash from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the thigh is from the private parts. So this is another hadith. This is a mu'allaq of Sahih al-Bukhari, but it's in the passive tense. So this is.
So how do they ascertain the
authenticity? Okay, now it comes. Why would Bukhari rahimahullah even use the mu'allaqat? So these are so many examples of mu'allaqat. So they say, in Sahih al-Bukhari, no, in Sahih Muslim is 13. In Sahih Bukhari there's many, right? In Sahih Muslim there's 13 mu'allaqat. In Sahih al-Bukhari there's so many. One of the reasons why I mentioned this, why I even mentioned mu'allaqat again, because we talked about mu'allaqat in the past, is al-Bukhari, when he uses mu'allaqat, this is a point mentioned by the scholar, is he uses riwaya bil mana. So he will just narrate the hadith not as the Prophet said it, but with the same meaning as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. For example, al-Bukhari said, okay, so this is one of the things. Well, mu'allaqat, one of the reasons why he does mu'allaqat is just say the meaning. And the reason why he would do that is he is trying to prove something from the hadith. So he will say, for example, his proof is the thigh is from the private parts. That's his proof. Maybe it's not mentioned like that, particularly in those specific words. This is a bad example because it's an athar of Ibn Abbas. For example, this is also a bad example because it's regarding the Prophet ﷺ, a quality about him which a Sahaba narrated. Or for example, the Prophet ﷺ says a certain thing, and he said in a particular way, but al-Bukhari does not preserve the exact wording. He says it in different words. The intention behind that could be because al-Bukhari wants to prove a point from this hadith. Like for example, the thighs are from the private parts. Yeah, al-Bukhari wants to prove a point. So he'll just mention that athar and not mention the full hadith because he's just proving that from that particular hadith. Maybe elsewhere in his book, he's mentioned it with the full chain and he's just alluding back to it. Right? This could be one of the reasons. But again, al-Bukhari, when he narrates from this, it's like this. Again, sometimes you might think when al-Bukhari does ta'liq, is it the same as tadlis? And the reality is it's not. About Bukhari rahimahullah, it was said that he was ab'adun nas an tadlis. He was the furthest people from doing tadlis, missing people out in the middle of the chain. For example, al-Bukhari said, وَعَنْ حُسَيْنٍ الْمُعَلِّمِ. Al-Bukhari rahimahullah never heard from Hussein al-Mu'allim. He was a bit further on. But, some scholars, Al-Aini said, this is from the Mu'allaqat of Bukhari. This is, from the Mu'allaqat. But Ibn Hajar said this is not from the Mu'allaqat, from Hussein al-Mu'allim. I think it would become clearer if we gave another example of riwaya bil mana, because riwaya bil mana does not only occur in the mu'allaqat, it actually occurs when Bukhari gives his full sanad. For example, al-Bukhari said, حدثنا محمد بن علاء قال حدثنا أبو أسامة عن بريد بن عبد الله عن أبي بردة عن أبي موسى رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكر ربه مثل الحي والميت. So Bukhari mentioned with this chain that the example of the person who remembers his Lord and the person who does not remember his Lord is like a dead person and a living person. It's like comparing a dead person to a living person. This is the comparison that is mentioned in the hadith. But that's not actually the full hadith. The full hadith is narrated by Imam Muslim, where he says with his chain, and it actually links up. It links up at Muhammad ibn al-Ala, because al-Bukhari heard from Muhammad ibn al-Ala, and al-Muslim heard the same hadith from Muhammad ibn al-Ala, and they share the same chain going backwards. But Muslims' wording is different, Bukhari's wording is different, and this is from the specificity of Imam Muslim, and the reason why some scholars prefer Sahih Muslim over Sahih al-Bukhari, because of this reason, that al-Muslim preserves the words, the exact wording. Al-Bukhari allows riwayah bil ma'na, and riwayah bil ma'na in general is allowed if you have certain conditions. This will be further explained in the future. But so Al-Muslim says again with the same sanad, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مثل البيت الذي يذكر الله فيه والبيت الذي لا يذكر الله فيه مثل الحي والميت. The example of a house where Allah isn't remembered, and a house where Allah's name is remembered is like a dead person, a living person. So the word house is mentioned. But Al-Bukhari just mentioned the person who doesn't do it, because obviously the house is not going to do the dhikr, the person inside the house. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is alluding to. So it shares the same meaning, but Al-Bukhari rahimahullah just mentioned the example of that. But how do we know that the wording was as Imam Muslim's words? It's because we know. Sorry?
Imam Bukhari.
Yeah. How do we know the wording was Imam Muslim's words? Because Al-Bukhari narrated by meaning.
Okay.
Yeah. How do we know it's Imam Muslim's word? It's because other people who have written mustakhrajat, and that's a genre of hadith book I mentioned before. It's where a scholar will look at all the chains of Bukhari, all the hadith of Bukhari, and they will find another their own chain going back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that will serve as a tabi' or a shahid for that original hadith. And these works have been done by Abu Awana, the Mustakhraj of Abu Awana, and the Mustakhraj of Ismaili of Bukhari. So in the Mustakhraj of Ismaili and Abu Awana, they mention this hadith, but with the wording of Imam Muslim, not Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari was the only one who mentioned it with this particular wording, and other scholars as well. Later on, they've narrated this with the different wording. It's mentioned Ibn Habban also transmits this from Abu Ya'la and Abu likewise, and Abu Kurayb is Muhammad ibn Ala. So they said Haddathana Abu Kurayb, but Abu Kurayb and Muhammad ibn Ala are the same person. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, the famous commentator of Bukhari rahimahullah, says that it could be so وانفراد البخاري باللفظ المذكور دون بقية أصحابه أبي كريب دون بقية أصحاب أبي كريب وأصحاب أبي أسامة يشعر بأنه رواه من حفظه أو تجوز في روايته بالمعنى الذي وقع له. So this is show Imam Bukhari rahimahullah had a permissibility of doing riwayah bil ma'na. Okay, this is just a tangent I went on riwayah bil ma'na. So going back to the Ya'ul Kutub. So this, some people, their books got lost. For example, Abdul Malik ibn Habib ibn Sulaiman al-Andalusi. So he used to actually narrate from his student's book. So he's a famous scholar of Andalus. He used to narrate from his student books, and Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says فَلَعَلَّهُ كَانَ يُحَدِّثُ مِنْ كُتُبِ غَيْرِهِ فَيَغْلِطُ. So he used to narrate from other people's books, and he used to err because of that. Abdul Aziz al-Darawardi also used to narrate from the books of others, and he used to make mistakes. Muhammad ibn Abda ibn Harb al-Qadi, so he used to narrate from other people's books, and that's why they used to err. So it's reading your own handwriting, reading other people's handwriting. It's quite a big issue sometimes. When you give someone else your notes. But nowadays we're in the era of typing, so he'll type these notes and share it. But in general, reading your own notes, you can make mistakes when you read other people's handwriting, especially when it's like doctor's handwriting, because they don't know what they're saying. So that's one reason.
Is the reason why they make it so cryptic that only the pharmacists can.
Yeah. To be honest, I think it starts off good. The handwriting starts off good.
Okay.
Power training.
And it trains to get worse. So other instances also, it doesn't mean your books got lost. It means you didn't bring your books. For example, Ma'mar ibn Rashid, he went to Basra to visit his mother after he started living in Yemen, but he didn't take his books with him. And when he arrived in Basra, he used to narrate to people from his memory. When he was in Yemen, he used to narrate to people from his book. So he was Sahih. He was a really good person, etc. But his memory wasn't as good. But when he narrated from his books, he was Sahih. But when he went to visit his mom in Basra, he used to narrate to people from his memory, haddathana, from his memory, so many hadith, and he used to make mistakes. So the scholar said, all the Ahlul Basra who narrate from him, their narrations, are not are weak, are deemed weak because of this, because of his memory. And this weakness, again, I'll mention it again, I might not have clarified it before. It's not a weakness, in terms of they're a liar, they lied against the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, you have munkarul hadith. Someone asked me a question the other day about the haram. Let me just shut up. Okay. Someone asked me the other day about a question about the haram, and doing salah inside the haram. We know the famous hadith about the salah, the reward of the salah being multiplied, mentioned in several hadith books about when you read the salah in the Masjid al-Haram, it's like 100,000 times you're reading it. But is that just for salah, or is it for other ibadah? Like people donate Qurans to the haram, people donate money to the haram, dates, etc. People do these. People do good deeds in the haram, other good deeds other than salah, right? Are those deeds multiplied also? And the person was asking, is it just the Masjid al-Haram, or is it the full area that is described as haram? And there's a few differences of opinion in regards to that. But the point I'm making is, majority of the scholars said that it's to do with the salah that you do in the haram. That is multiplied, duna al-ghayr, like, except all the other ibadah. Like you don't do, all the other ibadahs aren't multiplied. It's just a salah. Except for Hasan al-Basri. Hasan al-Basri, the famous tabi'i, he said that deeds other than salah are multiplied. But he proves it from a hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, narrated in Ibn Majah. I don't have the hadith in front of me, but the hadith is narrated in Ibn Majah. But there's an individual in that chain. This is only one single chain, and in the hadith it was mentioned that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he narrated that whoever fasts in the haram, their rewards is multiplied. Whoever gives in charity in the haram, their rewards are multiplied. This single hadith mentioned in Ibn Majah. But in that hadith, there's an individual who is muttaham bil kidb. He's accused of lying. So then he's munkirul hadith. So that he's munkarul hadith. So the hadith becomes munkar. So that hadith is a lower level of weakness than this hadith would be, because this person is thiqah. But the reason why his narration is bad is because he left his books at home when he went on journeys. Yeah, so you take your books with you. But nowadays we've got phones and iPads, so you can just PDF it.
So when a hadith is narrated to someone else, what do they do? Immediately write it down, or how is it?
So when a hadith is narrated, so the next topic is about how hadith are narrated anyway. So I'll discuss it when we get to there. So for another example is, the famous example I always gave about Abdullah ibn Lahiya, whose books were actually burned. His books burnt. So anyone who narrated from him after his books were burnt, then it's not accepted. But before his books were burnt, the scholars who narrated from him, like Sufyan, when he narrated from him, it was before his books were burnt, then it was accepted. Again, Abdul Hamid ibn Ibrahim al-Hadrami, Abdul Aziz ibn Uram ibn Abdul Aziz al-Zuhri al-Madani, these books were also burnt. Again, inshighal an al-ilm, this is another category why a person becomes weak, is they stop narrating hadith for a bit. Go to med school, start becoming a doctor. Stop hadith. this Maulana. He was telling me the other day his ibadah become rusty. His reading became rusty. So again, it was back in the days of scholars, they were really good students of hadith. They were avid collectors of hadith from the scholars. But they started doing other things, like Abu Talib al-Hajjar, I mentioned before, al-Ummi, and Sharik ibn Abdullah al-Nakhai. He started being involved he started in the judicial system, becoming a judge, stopped narrating hadith for a bit. So later on, Hafiz ibn Hajar said about him, تغير حفظه منذ, basically his hifz, so his capability to remember things, right, and memorize, was altered since he became the wali of, he became the qadi of Kufa. because he was the Qadi of Kufa and he got involved in that. Likewise, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan al-Amawi, who became the Khalifa, he was a really good student of knowledge before he became the Khalifa. But when he started becoming the Khalifa, you have to prove certain things because of politics and, one of those things. And he started erring in his memory. So that's why, inshighal and al-ilm was a cause for him to become weak. Why is this not?
No.
Okay. Oh, mashallah, Sheikh Fahim. Talking with the devil. Inshighal and al-ilm, he's an example. he left Darul. Oh, mashallah. Sheikh. Okay, so you have some people, the reasons why they became weak is because they stopped narrating hadith and they started doing other jobs, right? But then they came back to narrating hadith, and when they came back to narrating hadith, whoever narrated hadith from them, it would be deemed weak, not because they're alive, because they started not doing narrating hadith. Another reason is because your eyesight becomes weak. If you're narrating from books and your eyesight becomes weak, the huruf of mess around, and you have that dyslexic vision. And when you narrate the hadith, you're narrating, obviously looking at the book, but your eyesight's weak. And this was an example. Abdul Razak ibn Hammam as-San'ani, he became, his eyesight deteriorated towards the end of his latter period of his life, and this is why he was deemed da'if after this. And Ishaq ibn Muhammad al-Madani, again, he had some deficit in his neurological deficit because of weakness of the mind. Al-Isaba bil-Falij. Okay, peripheral vascular disease. That's also a cause of becoming weak in narration. Why? Okay, peripheral vascular disease is you have a claudication or a block in your arteries, and it stops the blood from going to your peripheries.
Okay.
We call it falj. I'm not making it up. Mustalah al-medicine. Huh? Nope. Peripheral vascular, stroke, you got it. So if you've got peripheral vascular disease, what happens? You get neurological deficit, because if you have a stroke, so if you have that, if you have a clot and it travels all the way back up, embolism travels all the way back up, mustalah medicine, innit? Then you have a stroke in your brain, it can cause neurological deficit. That's why the scholars have mentioned, if you have falij.
You said the answer?
Yeah, he said, what did you say?
Yeah, stroke.
Stroke, yeah, and it causes that neurological deficit, which even they understood that. So if you have like this peripheral vascular disease, like they understood it as gangrene on the legs, right? And we see that in practice, right? That can later on lead. That's why you put them on what?
Tins.
Therapeutic dose, no, prophylactic dose of tins. That's an inside joke. I'm not supporting.
Medical.
Yeah. But regarding actually tins, just a side point I'll just mention to you, tinzaparin is a low molecular weight heparin, which thins the blood, and what it does, it contains pig enzymes inside. And wallahi, I was with this the hematologist. We were talking about this today. She doesn't have to do this, consultant hematologist. Whenever she sees her patient is a Muslim or a Jew, she won't prescribe this tinzaparin. She'll prescribe something else, fondaparinux, which just does the same job.
What's it called?
Tinzaparin. She would prescribe fondaparinux, which doesn't have the pig enzymes. And she only did that because she knows her Muslim patients would not, they don't eat pig. But obviously Muslims, if it's a need, it's fine. If the doctor prescribes it, it's fine. But even then, subhanAllah, what made me think is, this lady, she's not even doing it for thawab. And just is such a good ethic to have, just doing goodness out of the goodness of your own heart, giving people this medication because in their religion they don't accept this. And if the whole world was like that, subhanAllah, it's just a point of reflection. I don't know why. Okay, yeah. So peripheral vascular disease is a good link. So you have some neurological deficit, and the people like that. For example, Yahya ibn al-Yaman al-Ajali, he is from the senior students of Sufyan al-Thawri. Ibn al-Madini said about him, Saduq is a truthful person, but وَكَانَ قَدْ أَفْلَجَ فَتَغَيَّرَ حِفْظُهُ. So he had this peripheral vascular disease, and he had some neurological deficit later on. So when you would narrate hadith from him in the latter part of his life, you should keep this in check. Okay, now we have Tadeel. Okay, here it is. Jarh and Tadeel. So this is just going to be a quick run through of Ahkamul Jarh wa Tadeel. Again, if you're a weak narrator and you're narrating hadith, and you're weak because you don't see it right, you're just going to learn that and you're just going to transmit it, and people are not going to know the difference. Names and stuff like that. It's really important that when you're narrating hadith, you hear from your teacher the name, because names are quite difficult to pronounce. For example, Modi Saab, Donald Trump. I don't know if you, Mr. Donald Trump. This is tasheef, because you're not reading it properly. You think it's right because no one corrected you. Right? So this is really important when reading hadith, that you hear it. It's a science of hearing. Names are something to be heard and to be learned like that. Sometimes when there's no fatha kasra dhamma to aid you, even then, to pronounce certain things become difficult, like Donald Trump, Mr. Donald Trump. So Jarh and Ta'deel. This is a science of Jarh and Ta'deel, criticizing narrators and validating them, saying they're good and bad. So there's a need for investigation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, if someone comes to you with news, you should investigate it. And we spoke about these narrations as well, about investigation. So these are the really important points to consider when we talk about analyzing a person's biography. First is, speaking about narrators is permissible backbiting. So it's not, I'm talking about them. No, this is permissible because it's for the good of the religion. And you're not backbiting, you're actually clarifying how a person's character was, in order so people understand if they should narrate hadith from him or not. To speak about narrators requires integrity, piety, critical thinking, and moderation. For example, some people talked about particular people. For example, Al-A'ma Sulaiman ibn Mahran. He said, "Oh, so and so, I'm never going to narrate hadith from him." Why? Oh, because he rides a Turkish horse. Just because brother's got a bit of money doesn't mean he's going to be a weak narrator. Just because brother drives an Audi doesn't mean he's going to be a better narrator than the brother who drives a Volkswagen. It's one of those things. This sort of thing doesn't affect your narrating capacity, and this is not a valid criticism. So in order to criticize someone, the criticism needs to be valid. Thirdly, the reports which contain criticism for validation need checking for authenticity. Who said this? Is it correctly attributed to them? Imam Bukhari and Muslim accepting certain narrations in the collection does not mean those narrators are completely reliable. So this is another thing it's mentioned here later on, that just because I narrate hadith from someone does not mean I say they're authentic. Not necessarily. This is an opinion. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said about a man called Jabir al-Ju'fi, that even if this dude is in the hatim of the Kaaba, is in the hatim of the haram, inside the Kaaba, that place, narrating hadith from you, narrating hadith to you, do not accept his hadith, because he's a liar, kadhabun, dajjalun, the worst form of criticism you can give to a person. Yeah. Despite that, we see in the Muwatta of Imam Muhammad, حدثنا أبو حنيفة حدثنا جابر al-Ju'fi. So he narrated from him. In the Muwatta of Imam Muhammad, from Imam Hanifa. There's a transmission from Jabir al-Ju'fi. But then, people can answer that saying that this was before Jabir al-Ju'fi became like this really bad person and insidious person in the eyes of Abu Hanifa. But again, just because someone narrates from someone doesn't mean that they are authentic in their understanding. A narrator may be reliable, but the hadith can still be weak. A narrator could be weak, but the hadith may overall be authentic. Okay, this is how we establish adala. Okay, this is exactly goes along with this book. So a lot of the scholars of hadith, I mentioned this in the past, they didn't outline their conditions. Al-Bukhari rahimahullah didn't outline, these are my conditions for a hadith to be sahih. You know, these are the conditions of a hadith that I'm going to include for them to be included in my book. Rather, they were worked out, right? Imam Muslim rahimahullah did in the Muqaddim Imam Muslim to some extent, but Al-Bukhari certainly didn't, except obviously for the thing about tathabbut bil liqa. That's an exception to that. But in general, he didn't say these are my conditions for Sahih Hadith or these are my conditions for Da'if Hadith. Rather, they worked out, and other scholars, for example, Abu Bakr al-Hazimi, he had a book called Shurutu A'immat al-Khamsa, the conditions of the 5 Imams, because he didn't include Ibn Majah in the Sahih Sittah. And this is at the back of our, these Indian prints that we have of Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. So it's printed along with that, but no one reads it, right at the back. Okay, so proving authenticity, the integrity. So for a person to narrate hadith, to take hadith, they have to be Muslim, baligh, aqil, they have to be free from the reasons of fisq, of open sin, saliman min khawarim al-muruwa. They have to be free from the things that affect muruwa. You don't say anything. What's muruwa? I just want to know. What's your understanding of muruwa? Because we had this discussion with him last time. This is just a specific question for him because what's muruwa? Like in any context, al-maru ala dini khalili.
Maru means man.
Yeah. So what will muruwa be?
Manhood.
Manliness. Yeah. So this is. Yeah, okay, so Muruwa, the translation that we looked up and stuff, is chivalry. When they say chivalry is dead?
Chivalry.
Yeah, so chivalry, what's your understanding of chivalry?
Like men are superior.
No. So chivalry, what we looked it up last time, it's basically a code, a knight's honor. A knight does certain things in a certain way. They're really proper about things. They won't take the back door route.
I'm thinking about different word. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like a gentlemanly, yeah. So al-muruwa, so they're not devoid of this gentlemanliness, yeah. Muruwa is kind of manhood. That's what I said, and he said it's not manhood, it's chivalry. But you were right in a way, and I was right in a way. Yeah. So the way we find out someone is adil. Is a good, has good integrity. How? What's number one there? Fame and reputation. So I don't need to say, okay, Ahmed is really good narrate from him hadith. If everyone already knows him, because everyone comes to Medina Mosque and they see him, mashallah, here every single day, 5 times a day here, praying Quran, every single class is here, right? He is known for his adala. No one needs to explicitly say it. It's like an unwritten thing that if you come masjid after any salah, you'll find him there. Unwritten rule. So our fame, istifada or shuhra. But again, there's some books which are dedicated to just saying so and so is a good narrator. تنصيص إما بتنصيص المعدلين عليها أن ينص العلماء التعديل أو واحد منهم عليها. So for example, Ibn Hibban had a book, Kitab al-Thiqat, where he narrated so-and-so is good, so-and-so is good, so-and-so is good. Okay, so these are the 2 ways. Famous testimony of contemporary scholars. Contemporary, this should be in brackets or like highlighted. Because contemporary is meaning, later on, we find out about, people saying so-and-so is weak. I live with you and I narrate hadith with you for so long. We had some argument. For that, I could then say later on, oh yeah, he's weak anyway. Why you listen to him? Yeah. So this is looked at with a lot of scrutiny. Jarh, a weakening or a disparagement of a contemporary. This is looked at with scrutiny because other factors could play a part. But you have, for example, famous scholars, Imma Arba, the Abu Hanifa. This is famous, although some people disagree, which is so very silly, I find, about Imam Hanifa's integrity being weak. He's a weak narrator. This is a very silly argument. Is mashhur ala thiqatihi. right? The entire world acknowledges it. Shafi'i rahimahullah said, "An-nasu ayalun fil fiqh ala Abi Hanifa." And the Aimma Arba, the Sufyanain, the two Sufyans, Sufyan Thawri, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Al-Awza'i, and other scholars also. Ibn Abdul Barr, rahimahullah said he had just a unique opinion that everyone is good narrator. Everyone who narrates hadith is a good narrator. And his understanding why he said that, why would he say that? Everyone who narrates hadith, a good narrator. Muslim, good narrator. Arms legs, good narrator. You haven't got that peripheral vascular disease. Good narrator. Why? Why would he say that? Sheikh Fahim knows, you definitely know this. Yeah, I'll accept. No, the hadith, it's in Zad al-Talibin also, that's what I said. يحمل هذا العلم من كل خلف عدول ينفون عنه تحريف الغالين وانتحال الباطنين وتأويل الجاهلين. That, everyone who holds this knowledge is the person who will use it to combat the people who are against Islam. Right? They're gonna be upright and they're gonna use it to combat. So Allah will choose those specific people, right? Otherwise, He wouldn't give them the tawfiq to learn the hadith. But this is obviously a weak opinion because people say this hadith is weak. يحمل هذا العلم من كل خلف عدول. But again, there's a lot of turuq for this. Even though the individual hadith may be weak, they give strength to each other and it reaches Hasan li ghayrihi. Wallahu a'lam. So is saying someone's good, criticism of a narrator, saying someone's good, saying someone's bad, is it okay to do that without giving a reason?
No.
What about saying good things? So and so is good.
Some scholars even that's also backbiting.
No. I'm saying, for example, a hadith scholar, right? Okay. So you can say someone's bad. There can be many reasons someone's bad.
Yes.
He's bad because he smokes. He's bad because he does this. He's bad because he does that, fraud guy. He's bad because there's so many reasons. But there's specific reasons why someone's bad. But for goodness, for example, I'm saying someone's doing Ahmed's Tadeel. Someone's saying, he's a really credible hadith narrator. So am I going to say, yeah, he wakes up for Fajr. He wakes up, he prays Dhuhr, he prays Asr, he prays Maghrib, he prays Isha, he prays the Sunnahs of Fajr, he gives the Zakah, he goes on Hajj. There's so many reasons why to give, for why a person's good. But for Jarh, to disparage someone, you have to give specific reasons because your reasons might not even be valid why you're disparaging him. For example, Al-A'mash, I always give this example, that if he sees someone on a Turkish horse, he doesn't narrate hadith from him. Again, some of the hadith narrated, this is attributed to Imam Bukhari also, that he saw this guy, he had like food in his hand, and he went to his horse, he didn't have anything, but he's pretending he had food in his hand, and Bukhari didn't narrate from him. This is not kind of a reason for jarh. Or people can interpret it meaning, oh yes, fisk is a really bad thing, blah blah blah. He's not being honorable. It's on the khawanim murua. It's not like a good thing, not gentlemanly to do that. Even with animals, you should respect them. From that aspect, yeah. But in general, this is not a good reason for jarh. So you have to elucidate your reason why you did it. So أما الجرح فلا يقبل إلا مفسرا. So we accept jarh, but jarh mufassar. So if you have Tadeel on a person and jarh on a person, which takes precedence? Okay, these are the things. For example, alcoholic, fasiq, liar, disbeliever, non-effective, permissible actions, even if customarily criticized, committing major sins, doing a prohibited action, bid'ah, not leading to disbelief. This is not something that affects it, unless obviously if it's leading to disbelief or if you propagate it. This is the bid'ah thing. Okay, almost done. 10 minutes, inshallah. So if a narrator has ta'deel on him, right? Someone says he has good integrity. Someone else says no, he's a bad narrator. What do you accept? Good.
You verified that which is bad.
Okay, say you verified it and someone else says it's good and you verified that was good, that was like authentic, then what would you expect?
So it's good and bad.
There's good and bad in him. What do you do? المختلف في راوي.
Take the majority.
One of the opinions is look at the majority. So if the majority of the people are looking at his integrity, right, or erring on the side of that he's got integrity, then you would take that. And if the majority of the people said jarh, then you would take that as well. But this is not the opinion of the majority. The majority say that if there's jarh if it's mufassar, if it's a reason given, and then if there's a reason given why this guy is bad, then you prefer that over Tadeel, because that you rather keep that. You rather keep that probability of erring on the side of caution. So this is the reason why. I talk about that one. Again, this scholar says, عمل العالم وفتياه على وفق حديث ليس حكما بصحته وليس مخالفة له قدحا في صحته ولا في روايته بل هو حكم بصحته. So if a scholar acts upon a hadith, does that mean he thinks it's authentic? Does that mean he thinks it's authentic? If a scholar acts upon a hadith?
Yeah. Not always.
If a scholar leaves out an action, doesn't act upon it, does that mean it's sahih or da'if according to him? So again, this is a difference of opinion also. For example, the hadith I mentioned always about Ibn Umar rahimahullah coming off the camel and praying witr. He narrated, the Prophet ﷺ prayed the witr on the camel, but he went against his own narration. This is what some of the fuqaha said, that this is, mansukh, that it changed, it was abrogated. That's why he's not doing amal of it, but it's still an authentic narration. Again, if you're narrating something, you're not acting upon it, doesn't mean that it's da'if, right? Again, if you narrate something and you do something against it, it doesn't mean it's da'if also, or if you do something and you narrate hadith, it doesn't mean it's sahih. So these are the things we need to keep in mind. If a person is a sinner but they repent later on, do we accept the hadith or not?
Yeah. After the repent.
One of the opinions is you accept the hadith because at-ta'ibu min adh-dhanbi kama la dhanba lah, person who does tawbah from a sin is like the person who has no sin. But the second opinion is you wouldn't accept their narrations because just to show that it's severe to lie. Yeah, it's severe to have this lying, and it's not accepted in the grounds of hadith at all. So just as a sort of retribution for this person, as a turning off for this person, you will never narrate hadith from him. This is some of what some of the scholars said. Again, حكم رواية من أخذ على التحديث أجرا. Narrating hadith from a person who accepts money for narrating hadith. Like this Maulana accepts money from Maktab. Do I? Oh. Every Maulana accepts money. We're students, right? So do you narrate hadith from him or not? Just show this class right now. We don't. لا تقبل عند البعض. Some scholars said you don't accept the narrations. Like Ahmad, it's from Abu Ishaq, Abu Hatim al-Razi. Again, some scholars says that you accept it. For example, Abu Nu'aym Fudayl ibn Dukayn. Some scholars say you accept the narrations. For example, that's why we're Hanafis, Abu Hanifa. Actually, the opinion from him in the beginning is you're not allowed. No, but this is contested. This is just spreading knowledge of the deen anyway and taking money for it. This is a separate discussion, but I'm talking specifically about taking hadith. This is what these are talking about. Again, what about narrating from those people who are known that they're really easy when it comes to authenticating or weakening hadith? Do we accept it from them?
If you're taking advantage, no.
For example, this leniency, what I mean by leniency is hadith classes going on. These are the narrations are going. I'm going to explain how a hadith class works. But hadith is going, haddathana. The Messenger of Allah said, but this lad was like, he didn't have his Red Bull today. knocks off, in the middle of the class. This is man urifa bit tasahul, and he was known for, being one of those lazy ones in the class, right?
Why are you looking at?
No, as in I'm lazy as well in general, like not here, but in general, like they're known, but from the peers, that's why you wouldn't narrate hadith from him. Or a person who narrates hadith from an asal ghair muqabal, meaning they narrate hadith from a book which they didn't compare to the book of their teacher, or it wasn't transmitted as asal ghair muqabal. Or a person who is mulaqqan. I've mentioned this. What is talqeen? Do you guys know what talqeen is? Talqeen, in general fiqh, what's talqeen? Talqeen, you know. Talqeen al-mayyit.
Or to remind.
So what is talqeen when it comes to at the time of death?
To say la ilaha illallah over and over.
Yeah. So when a person dies, you don't command them say la ilaha illallah. Everyone just starts reciting la ilaha illallah. This is called talqeen. Reminding someone. In the chapter of fiqh, talqeen is reminding someone to say la ilaha illallah. In the bab of hadith, in the chapter of hadith, talqeen is when you narrate from a scholar, you go back to him and you say, you narrated this to me, and he says, I did, but he doesn't really know. So this is reminding of someone that you narrated this hadith to me, and this actually happened in the past. So for example, someone did the tahdith, but then they forgot. وَأَلَّا يُذْكَرَ الشَّيْخ رِوَايَةَ مَا حَدَّثَ بِهِ تِلْمِيذُهُ عَنْهُ. So for example, إن تردد في نفيه كي يقول لا أعرفه أو لا أذكره ونحو ذلك. For example, someone says, I can't remember me narrating that to you. Right? Then, this is so he did, and then he says, and everyone else heard it who was in the masjid from him. And sometimes ابن أبي أمين مع الشاهد قال عبد العزيز بن محمد الدراوردي حدثني به ربيعة بن أبي عبد الرحمن عن سهيل فلقيت سهيلا فسألته عنه فلم يعرفه. So I met Suhail and I asked him about this hadith and he said, I don't know this hadith. فقلت حدثني ربيعة عنك بكذا. فصار سهيل بعد ذلك يقول حدثني عبد العزيز عن ربيعة أني حدثته عن أبي هريرة مرفوعا بكذلك. So then he says, someone says to Suhail that you narrated this hadith. Rabi'a narrated to me that you narrated to me this hadith. Then he said, oh, is it? Then he goes, you narrated to me that Rabi'a narrated to me that I said, blah, 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 blah. So he adds that bit in the chain because, he's a truthful person. So he adds that bit in the chain. So this is obviously, it's going to be a strong hadith. It's going to be slightly on the weaker side. But obviously it can be used for other things like mutaba'at and shawahid. So, okay. So this was just in general about Jarh and Tadeel, we mentioned last time. And the books of Jarh and Tadeel. So you have specific books which mentions like such and such a scholar is sahih. You have specific... Okay, no worries, inshallah.
Listen to
okay, inshallah, no worries. We're almost done anyway.
Tadeel close to get some.
Okay, no worries. Your weekly Taj shop, yeah? Your weekly Taj shop. So some scholars actually have specific books where they mention all of the narrators of the Sihah Sitta, right? And, all of the biographies. Some scholars mention specific books, like the Kitab al-Thiqat of Ibn Hibban, that just mention trustworthy narrators. Some scholars have specific books where they mention only, the Kitab al-Du'afa wal-Majruhin, weak narrators. These are specific books. And examples of these are given. Tarikh al-Kabir by Imam Bukhari, and that, encompasses weak and strong narrators. You have Kitab al-Jarh wa Tadeel by Ibn Abi Hatim, and that also is like the first book. You have the Kitab al-Thiqat by Ibn Hibban, and that is only specifically for trustworthy narrated. So anyone who's narrated in that book, the biographies are discussed, all of them are trustworthy. Then you have Al-Kamil fi Du'afa, and obviously that's for weak narrators as well. Al-Kamal fi Asma'i Rijal by Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, and this encompasses weak and strong narrators, but only in the Sihah Sitta, only in these 6 books of hadith. All of the muhaddithun that I mentioned, it only discusses them. You have Tahdhib al-Tahdhib by Ibn Hajar, and it's like a mukhtasar of the previous book Al-Kamal fi Asma' al-Rijal, and you have Taqrib al-Tahdhib, which is a refination of his own book Tahdhib al-Tahdhib. And the final thing is the Maratib al-Jarh wa Tadeel. This is here as well. So the grades of validation according to Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. So the highest stage of ta'deel, obviously the companions, radiallahu anhum wa radu anhu, Allah establishes their integrity in the Quran. So these are people who have the highest level of integrity. Second is thiqa dhabat. So this is the terminology mentioned by Hafiz ibn Hajar. ما دل على المبالغة في التوثيق أو كان على وزن أفعل وهي أرفعها مثل فلان إليه المنتهى في التثبت أو فلان أثبت الناس. So if we say فهيم أثبت الناس, what does that mean? He's the highest level of authenticity. He is the most trustworthy of narrators, right? When you say about someone, this is the highest level. Then you have the second level where you say 2 qualities or the same quality twice. ثقة ثقة or ثبت ثقة. ثقة ضابط mentioned here, the number 2. Then you have 1 level of accreditation, ثقة or حجة. Then you have things that allude towards the ضبط without mentioning it specifically, meaning they tell the truth. محله صدق, or the place is a place of truth. ولا بأس به في غير عند غير ابن معين, or if you say there's no harm about him in other than Ibn Abi Mu'in. So if Ibn Abi Mu'in said this, then it means the thiqa. So it means they're in level 3, right? So if you said there's no problem about him, we'd say it's in level 5. But if one particular scholar, Yahya ibn Abi Ma'in, if he said this, then we go back, he's in level 3, right? So that's why we need to, this effort's been made by the scholars of the past as well. And in Raf' al-Takmil fi Jarh wa Ta'deel by Allama ibn Abdul Hayy al-Laknawi, he also mentioned specific scholars can have specific terminology, but this is just a general terminology. And the exemptions we will mention, like this exemption of Yahya ibn Abi Ma'in. So again, you say fulanun shaykhun aw rawa anhu nas, the people narrate from him. And the last level is yuktabu hadithuhu. So if you say his hadith are written, okay, so this saduqun Fahim, truthful but prone to making mistakes, and the maqbul layyin, accepted, no proof why his report shouldn't be accepted. And then you have, okay, this is jarh. Then you have the last level, which is yuktabu hadithuhu. His hadith are written. What does that even mean? His hadith are written. So if someone says his hadith are written, what does it mean?
Written in the book.
As in, his hadith should be written.
Well, that means he's trustworthy.
It sounds like that, but it's actually a form of discouragement from narrating him. Meaning he's not that good of a narrator, but for tawabi and shawahid, as a follow-up narration, you can use it. Yeah. So his hadith are written, yuktabu hadithu litawabi wa shawahid. For like follow-up narrations, then it's fine. Okay. Then you have maratib al-jarh. And this is the final thing, grades of criticism, al-jarh. According to Hafiz ibn Hajar, you have majhulul hal, we don't know anything about him. And we mentioned the examples of this, whose integrity is unknown, but there is nothing negative about him. We don't know who he is. We have to investigate who he is. And this is obviously, so it's going from least weak to most weak. Then you have da'if, then you have majhul, unknown, obscure, no more than one person has narrated from him. So majhul person is when one person narrates from him. But you have to be careful, because sometimes you might think someone's majhul, but they're not actually majhul, right? Because they were known by different names, or they were known by different qualities, etc. For example, Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, a famous scholar of Andalus, obviously he said Imam Tirmidhi was majhul. But Abu Isa Tirmidhi was obviously not majhul. But maybe the books didn't reach him, but he was well known. And you have matruk, meaning someone is abandoned, you abandon him. Like the individual I mentioned before about the hadith of the haram, doing good deeds in the haram, other than salah is multiplied. Narration Ibn Majah. A person in that is muttaham bil kidh, so he's matruk, so he's on level 4. So this hadith is da'if and we can't use it for ihtijaj and proof. And you have muttaham bil kidh. Okay, that's that. Muttaham bil kidh, munkarul hadith. Accused of lying. So munkirul hadith is a person who's muttaham bil kidh. So if you say fulan munkarul hadith, like An-Nasai says sometimes, and fulan indahu manakir, likewise. Then you have a kadhab, which is the worst area, kadhabun dajjalun. And the worst actually phrasing that's used about people. Again, this is, for example, words like this. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said about Jabir al-Ju'fi. Even if he's narrating to you from the Hatim, you don't accept him. So this is kind of the worst forms of disparagement. And the last form is you say Dajjal, Kadhab. You repeat it, or you say Fulanun akdhabun nas. That so and so is the worst liar amongst the people. Right? There is no one worse than him when it comes to lying. So this is the worst kind of attribution you can make from someone about this. And we mentioned these are the books: Al-Kamal fi Asma' al-Rijal, Tahdib al-Kamal, Taqrib al-Tahdib, Tahdib al-Tahdib. These are both by Hafiz ibn Hajar. This is by Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, Al-Mizzi, Al-Kamal fi Asma' al-Rijal. And these are the books that are limited to weak narrators. Lisan al-Mizan, Al-Du'afa, Al-Kabir. You have Al-Kamal fi Du'afa al-Rijal. Okay, so then comes the science of Takhrij. And this is where this presentation ends. So inshallah, the next few lessons on this are just about the way hadith is transmitted, ikhbar. For example, Imam Malik rahimahullah, he preferred ikhbar, al-qira'ah al-shaykh. So his students would read the hadith, and he would just corroborate if this hadith is if it's read correctly. If there was a mistake, he would tell them there's a mistake there. But the reason why he did that is obviously he didn't want people to make mistakes in the word of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is why, because if you don't do this, if you don't correct people, you have problems like Donald Trump, So no one's correcting him, and even Trump made a lot of mistakes when he was speaking Hindi as well. These words. So inshallah we'll continue this next time. The turuq, tahammul, wasiyah al-ada, munawala. I had a question. What's your view on niqab? Nope. Okay.
So
I'm not gonna answer that today. Okay. The coronavirus, COVID-19. So if you want to find out about the coronavirus, go 2 lessons before, inshallah. Okay, so we'll call it a day. Inshallah, subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
I do know this.